Sometimes life is yikes.
And that's okay. You're not alone. Welcome to Yikesland. Hi, guys, and welcome to Yikesland. Insert the jingle here. We'll come up with a jingle.
We have a jingle intro.
The jingle, little yike. Is that what it is?
It's kind of our intro song. Hey, we have an intro song we made, right?
Jingle, little yike. I guess that's what a jingle is. To me, a jingle was more musical, but I think I have it backwards. That's a slogan.
That's true. Yeah, we have an intro theme.
Like word thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
A phrase.
Yeah.
Of words.
Yeah. I don't know what.
A saying. We have an intro
maybe
saying.
Jingle does include words.
Maybe.
I am not sure. Anyway, you guys can let us know. I am your host, Chris Fung.
This is Jingle Cast.
Along with my jingle yike.
Hi, everybody. It's Jelani Hoon.
Jinglani.
Jinglani. That's right.
Yeah.
Jelani here for you.
And welcome to Yikesland, our podcast about sadness and depression and anxiety. And imagine these voices are flying in a real scary way.
That's right.
And all things yikes. We are here today with episode 26.
Whoa.
As I said earlier, that's how many I am, so that's exciting. I'm glad we have made it this far, and I'm glad you guys have made it to another Tuesday with us.
That's right, because every Tuesday that you're here with us, it makes it great. Not just because you're listening to the podcast or anything like that, but we want to make sure that you guys make it to every single day and every Tuesday after that, because a day without you would make the world a lesser place. We want you here with us.
Please feel free to reach out to us on our Twitter or Facebook and our Instagram at Yikesland_podcast, or you can email us at yikesland@gmail.com. If you guys are listening on various podcast services or YouTube, we would appreciate the appropriate like or rating or whatever, because all of that helps us get some visibility and build this Yikesful community. That sounds like a bad thing, like you wouldn't want to be part of it. But if you're already part of it, it's too late now.
It's like the game. You don't.
You're
if
in the Yikesland now, folks.
Yes. If you don't know that you're in it, then you're not in it. But if you know you're in it, then you're in it, and you've already lost. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what this phrase is going.
Yeah, we're very jolly for depressed people.
Yes, we are.
And on that note, I will start the podcast off like we usually do. Jelani, how are you?
Hi, it's Jelani. How's it going?
Yeah, it is. I hope so.
Yeah, I am doing okay. Last week, I know I was a little bit of a downer boy last week.
That's okay.
I apologize for that, but I know that was okay, and I know that sometimes things don't go the way you guys want them to, or the way life wants you to, and outside stressors can happen. So, still recovering from everything, but I feel like I'm on track and trying to stay afloat and trying to stay, kind of, on a steady course of just like, hey, you know what, I'm here in Yikesland, but I don't want to leave, type of thing, So that's where I am, been okay. How about you?
I'm pretty anxious this week with work stuff and trying to get ready for a big event, but I think for me that's normal. Like, even if it's something I've done a bunch of times before, because I have, or even if each individual task is not hard at all, it's like the fact that I have many things on my to-do list that is necessarily going to give me anxiety. Although when I don't have enough things on my to-do list, I am also anxious. So isn't that
This is a double-edged sword, if one may will.
But yeah, other than that, I've been getting good support from my partner recently, which has been really nice.
Great.
And enjoying the days that are... Today was not nice outside, but enjoying the days that are nice, because I think the weather affects me a lot more than I realize, which is something I've mentioned before. So it's nice to kind of have that almost summer feeling
Mm-hmm.
that will be here for 3 days, and
Probably.
then it'll be winter again
Yeah.
in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's just been crazy, especially on a day like today where we've had sun and then thunderstorms and then back to sun, and it's been weird. I don't know. You can
there's
experience
a lot of like festivals and stuff coming up around here in Milwaukee. Are you planning to attend anything, or are you avoiding the crowds like we talked about with the social anxiety last time?
Man, that's a tough one there. Like I feel like I want to get out and do some stuff, but at the same time it's like the social anxiety is just prevalent, and I don't know if I want to jump wholeheartedly into that. I know that like Summerfest is going to be starting here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is like, one of the biggest music festivals, and while that's cool and everything, I sometimes do find myself just like kind of just want to isolate myself, but who knows, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I mean, I'm trying to see, maybe someone will go with me. I don't know, maybe I'll go with a group of friends or something like that, and kind of build that like wall of like I have this support group with me who's just kind of just like, hey, we're just all here, and I have like a focal point to anchor myself down, I guess, because as we talked about on the social anxiety podcast, like I normally need someone to like anchor myself down into an area that, like, if there is like something where I'm really heavily exposed to something that's like triggering my like social anxiety, type thing. So maybe we'll see. I'm gonna try. What about you? Are you gonna be getting out?
I don't usually end up having time to go to any of those things because, they're usually on the weekend, and that's hard for me to get away. I would go to Summerfest or like anything if it was a prearranged situation where somebody else was like, we're going to this, do you want to come? But I would never be like the leader of my own excursion into a crowd situation. So, I think I would be okay with it. It'd be interesting to go to a giant, very busy festival like State Fair or something, like alone. Like,
that's a tough one.
I wonder what would happen to me, because what if it was so bad that it became okay,
Oh.
What if there were just so many people around me and I was so alone that it became chill? I wouldn't do that to myself. Because it seems like a risky experiment.
It does. It does.
I was just thinking, I don't know what would happen. I would go, but I'm not gonna cause, any of it. I think when I first moved here, I went to almost every single various themed like ethnic food festival type of situation. With my roommate, and we had a good time doing the whole tourist thing, and some stuff that was in like parks and stuff, not on the festival grounds. So we would bring the dogs. So like that's another thing. If you have dogs, that's a really good social anxiety block that I forgot to talk about last time. But if you have dogs, like they deflect attention away from you, and I'm always that person at a party who will go pet the dog instead of talking to other adults. That's a really good out. Or, like, go play with some children, Like, you unnecessarily go interact with children just so that you don't have to talk to other adults. Because, like, kids don't really judge you as much. And if they do, then you're like, whoa, that kid's messed up. I hope they're okay later.
Okay.
So I feel like... but, yeah, I think having the dogs around, like, was also helpful. Because it kind of, like... You can have a conversation, but the conversation is filtered through the concept of dogs. People will ask very expected questions like, oh, like, is it a boy or a girl? What breed is it? What mix of breeds is it? Like, what do they like to do? And you're like, dog things.
Yeah,
they like eating
things.
shrimp off the ground.
Yeah.
Specific example, obviously.
Yeah, very specific. Very, very specific example.
But yeah, I think that summer festivals can be like a fun way to force yourself to go out sometimes, because there's so much stuff happening. Because I think a lot of the time it's easy to sort of back out of things or say no to things in group situations because you're like, oh, I won't be missed that much because I'm only one of many people that are attending this thing. So, like, I don't really matter. And for me, I'll kind of start to lie to myself and be like, you don't even matter in this friend group. Like, they're going to have fun without you. You're not really necessary. Like, they're not actually going to miss you. That's probably not true. Like, it's very likely that your friends will miss you because they're your friends. But it's easy when you're, like, a sad person that it's easy to be like, oh, yeah, but my friends don't really care about me. I'm just another person in the group. So, like, do I even really need to be here? But during the summer when so many things are happening and you're, like, getting pressured to go to more things just because more things are happening than during the winter, you'll, like, accidentally end up going to more things just because you need to maintain the ratio of, like, 5 yes, 5 no's, and then 1, like, okay, fine, I should go out, whatever. So, yeah. I've been trying to be more
active.
Yeah, more like Johnny excited about going out recently, even if some of it is fake, just because I think it tricks me into being happy, or it tricks me into being away from at home where I can think, oh, I shouldn't be taking a break. I should be doing the laundry. I should be cleaning, blah, blah, blah. Or being at work where I'm like, obviously I'm not going to relax because I have lots of work things that I could do even though they don't necessarily need to be done in the moment. Because all of that stuff will really, like I said about the to-do list earlier, I can never stop thinking about what stuff there is to do or that I should be doing and trying to optimize what I'm doing with my time. So any chance to, like, force myself out of that stuff because I'm in a group social situation where people expect me to be present and talking to them, it's kind of good. So
yeah, it is a positive thing.
I hope to see you out there on the festival grounds someday, friend.
just randomly, hey, you're here too. It's like, yeah, I forced myself out.
You'll see me and I'll be alone.
Oh no.
I'll be like, I'm so alone that it's okay now.
just do the fanning thing. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. Just
I'm like in a corner, curled up in a ball, and
it's all right. It's all right.
I did it. I made it to the state fair.
She's a jock.
No, I like state fair. It's fine.
State fair is fine.
I don't really freak out that much.
Yeah,
Summerfest, yes.
Summerfest on certain days, yes, can be overcrowded. Yes, yeah. for here, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, folks.
Yeah. I feel like this didn't really happen to me as much in stuff in New York because I think it was more accepted that it was going to be a hellish amount of people everywhere all the time.
Maybe because, like, what did you describe? You described New York as always being busy and super hustle and bustle, and it's always crowded everywhere. So, like, maybe it's just the environment. You get used to the crowdedness of everything. Yeah. So, like
a frog in boiling water.
I don't know what does that metaphor represent?
No, that's an existing phrase that, like, if you turn the water up slowly, like, the frog doesn't, this is really dark, I guess, but the frog doesn't realize that the temperature is increasing, and then you can boil it and it won't jump out. If you turn the water, like, the temperature up suddenly, it'll be like, hot, and, like, jump out of the pot.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Oh, no, okay. I believe you. It's just like when I told you, like, the French style or something. The way the French do, you know. Yeah, I'm sure it's a phrase. I've never heard that phrase before, but okay, I believe it. Sure. Okay, yeah, and I'm saying, maybe I should be forcing myself out into crowded situations more, maybe that way I get used to it more. Maybe, you know, being in an environment of, like, oh, there's more happening, and I'm kind of, like, getting used to this type of environment more instead of, like, isolating myself with, like, there's no one around. I'm fine with this, you know.
But I mean, it's okay if, like, if you just aren't the type of person who wants to be around crowds, you don't have to pretend to be that, you know. Mm-hmm. But if it's, like, something that you do want to either, like, get better at or just experience more for some reason, like, then yeah, I guess there's nothing wrong with, like, trying to sort of train yourself, although that sounds very cruel and weird, but, like, I don't know. But if you're, like, fine with it, like, if you don't want to go out and you know you don't like going out, then just, like, don't do it if it doesn't work for you. But I guess for me, because it sometimes feels good or sometimes I'm glad that I did it, then I kind of try to, like, make myself do it more. Because I don't really, like a child in that I don't know what is and isn't going to be fun or enjoyable until it's too late, you know? Like, they're like, do you want to go to the Railroad Museum? And I'm like, no, I'm going to hate that. And then, like, you drag me to the Railroad Museum, and I'm like, wow, trains. I learned so much about trains. And you're like, yeah, I told you you were going to like it.
This sounds like another very specific.
That one was made up, actually.
Really?
So,
It was?
yeah.
Okay. All right. I almost believed the improv. Oh, bravo.
But yeah, I, speaking of sort of forcing yourself to do things or, like, being or not being, I guess is going to be our segue into our topic for this.
Segue?
Into our topic for this week. Although it's, again, not a good segue if we point it out.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that, guys. We'll get there.
It's our thing to point out the segue every time.
Yeah. Eventually, we'll also have a segue jingle. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Segue.
But that's also not musical and just our voices saying,
segue.
This is a segue. Segue in Yikesland. Maybe Yikesland is just a place where, like, everything is definitely awkward and very pointed out to you, So it makes sense that that's
it makes
what
more
a segue
sense.
would be like. But our topic for this week, would you like to take us through it?
Okay, so topic for this week, it's going to be so the idea of the things that for us that, like, it's not necessarily what we putting on, like, this mask to make ourselves look happier and anything like that. It is sometimes for people in our state, like, of depressiveness and everything like that, we tend to be stricken with, like, dark thoughts and even just negativity that, like, kind of, like, permeates from our inner selves.
Yeah, negative thought patterns, intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, and what we want to talk about today is kind of like what exactly we do to kind of, like, put ourselves into these positions of, like, trying to kind of hide that from, like, people who are, like, important to us in our lives, maybe our support groups, or people who are, like, even just, like, people who are partners or things like that. And the reasons why we do this, like, kind of more going into more discussion of, like, why we tend to hide the fact and put these space between, like, us and people who really care about us, and us and our, like, dark thoughts and our
I guess the most disturbing way to word it is, does being depressed or anxious make you never really share yourself with the people who care about you?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, like I said, that's the most disturbing way to word it. Like, that is the dark way that I think of it in my head. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily true, or it's not necessarily all true. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today, is just how are all the different ways that all of the dark stuff or negative thought patterns or, intrusive thoughts in our head that we don't end up saying out loud, not necessarily because we don't trust the person, but just because you don't always want to be saying, like, your intrusive thoughts out loud when you think of them. Mm-hmm. How does kind of the body of all of that stuff that's unsaid build up to create a space between you and the people you care about? And does it matter that there is that space? Does that mean that you're not being your real self to people, or does it mean that your real self is actually the stuff that you choose to say out loud rather than the stuff that your depression whispers in your ear?
Mm-hmm. Well, for you, what exactly does that mean for you? Like, right now, like, someone were to ask you, like, what is it that you don't like?
Yeah,
you
what
keep.
Am I hiding?
What are you hiding? What are you hiding?
Like, I have DL on my pocket. Just a lot of, like, disturbing thoughts in here. Like, I'm worthless. My face looks like a potato. I think I'm an alien person.
Yeah.
No, I think, this topic came up because I was thinking of it in the worst way, which is I was thinking, oh no, I can never be my real self to anyone, that either, like, a partner or just, like, a really good friend, somebody that I theoretically would trust with anything. But because I kind of do hold a lot of stuff back, I was thinking, oh no, that means that I'm never going to be my real self to anyone. And that really bothered me, and I was really stressed out about it. And I think that for me, the reason why I don't say a lot of that's like, you can't, the number of intrusive thoughts that like I personally have, there's no way, like I would spend all day saying those out loud to somebody. Like they'd have to sit next to me and just listen to me because the thoughts come really fast. So like they'd have to sit next to me and listen to me spew intrusive thoughts all day. And I guess like in a way they would know what was going on in my head. But that doesn't mean, you know, if I said that stuff out loud all the time, that would be the only thing I ever talked about. And that's not the thing that I want to talk about. And that's not what I want to be the only thing I ever talk about. So that's part of why I don't do it, you know, because you can only have a certain number of conversations at a time. And for me, I'm like, do I even want to be talking about the bad stuff that I'm thinking? And so it's not that I don't trust the person or that I don't want to reveal to them that I have all of these insecurities or whatever, because I try to be pretty open about the fact that that stuff exists, you know, like everybody knows this. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, it looks like an alien face. Like everybody that I care knows about that, and you know, and is supportive and whatever. But I don't necessarily want to talk about that all the time. Like I don't necessarily want to give the space to all of my negative thoughts all of the time. And sometimes it helps. Sometimes you're like, I need to talk about this because it's really bothering me, so I'm going to talk to somebody that I care about because like this stuff is hurting. Or for me, sometimes I'll like save it for the podcast for later, like when you save stuff for therapy.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's just because it's not the conversation I want to be having, and because I don't want to make the other person unnecessarily sad, you know, because if I told people, like at this point, because I have so many negative thought patterns that you try to fight against, but just like, I don't know, like sometimes the chemicals in your brain are this way and your brain wants you to be bad and sad, and you're like, no, brain, I'm not going to do it. And so if I gave the space to all of that, in some sense, I'm just like letting those pathways tread deeper and deeper. And I also don't want to hurt the people around me by letting them know all of the time that I think bad stuff about myself. You know, because if you were to tell me like, hey, I think I'm really worthless and, you know, I hate myself in this moment, blah, blah, blah. And you told me that every time you felt it, I would feel really sad. And I'm not saying don't tell me. Feel free to tell me anytime.
Okay.
But I would naturally, because I care about you, feel really sad. And so like it's my fear of making the people I care about feel like super sad for me too that kind of stops me from doing that stuff. And the analogy that I used earlier was if it's your friend's birthday and you're going to their birthday party, and on the way to their birthday party you stub your toe. When you show up to the party, you're like, hey, happy birthday, I'm so happy for you, this is a fantastic day, hope you're having a great time. You don't say, I stubbed my toe on the way here, you know? And I think because you want them to have a good birthday, and you don't want them to be thinking about the fact that you're in pain. You want them to be thinking nothing but happy birthday thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, in a way, there's not necessarily anything wrong with not saying that stuff just because you want other people to be able to enjoy their birthday. And there are times when, if instead of stubbing your toe, say you broke your toe, then you should tell them, hey, friend, I broke my toe. Like, now I need to go to the hospital to get a cast, you know? There are times that you should say something for sure and reach out to the people that care about you, because no matter how much you feel like you're an inconvenience, you're not an inconvenience. You matter to them, and you should tell them. But I also, like, I completely understand and often feel the feeling of, since this thing is like such a routine negative thought for me, I can totally handle it and it's not a big deal, and I almost just want to let it pass through me, and I never want to give space or weight to it at all, that I'm not going to tell them I stubbed my toe. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you think you should always talk about the toe?
No. So here's the thing. Like, the reason why I thought this was a great topic was because it kind of pertained to a little bit of what happened to me last episode that we talked about, where I had the dark weekend, right? And leading up to the episode, there was just a bunch of stuff, outside stressors, things like that. And I had said that I had went against what I usually do, where I was, I didn't reach out really. I isolated myself and things like that. And the way my thought pattern came about of me doing that was the idea of like, I don't want to like make anybody sad. I don't want anybody to like just to like, I don't want to ruin anybody's weekend. I don't want to ruin anything. I'm just going to isolate myself off, and whatever happens kind of thing. Because when you get overtaken by the dark, negative thoughts that you always like kind of bombard yourself with, eventually sometimes it wins out, and eventually like it kind of causes you to retract from everything, kind of like, and it became a thing where it was, I realized what I was doing, right? And even I even had some friends who were just like, hey, how's everything going? And I was like, it's fine, it's okay, have a good weekend, type of thing. And they were like, that's odd, how are you doing, really? And I was like, no, I'm good, type of thing. And I was like retracting and recoiling back from that. I was like, I'm doing okay, you'll be all right, because obviously it's a good day, and things are happening for other people, and I know that, I know what's going on with other people sometimes, and I don't want to be like the reason like things are always down. I don't want to be like, even though we have the support system around us and everyone is supporting each other, I sometimes like the negative thoughts also permeate, where it's just like, am I the one who's like always having something go wrong? Am I the dark one? Because I don't want to be the dark one. I don't want to bring everybody down type situation, And the same thing goes to like, if I were to tell you something of like, hey, I'm feeling pretty worthless, I would feel really bad that you're feeling bad about it. And I know you just said like, oh, but please tell me anytime. And the same thing, if you were to tell me something, of course, like you would think that I would feel really bad, but I would want you to tell me at the same time. It's this weird kind of like, circle of of just like vicious circle of just like, obviously I want to tell someone, but I don't want to make someone feel bad, but I feel bad. It makes me feel bad, and I think
the like the way that our brains are, and like when things start to get bad, sometimes it makes it hard for you to tell the difference between a stubbed toe and a broken toe. Like if I think a couple of bad things about like my worthlessness in a day, that's like a pretty standard day for me, and that's fine. But if I like start to think about it too much, where that's all I thought about all day, like I should probably tell somebody. Only at that point I'm like unable to tell the difference between the two of them. And I guess that's, it sounds like that's kind of what happened to you for a while there, where you're like, oh, now I have not yet, like there's a period before you realize, okay, this has risen to the level of I should have actually been talking to somebody. When you're like, this is fine. It's the dog meme where the dog
I'm fine.
Sitting in
Everything's
there
fine,
surrounded by flames and saying, this is fine,
I'm okay with this, or
it's the frog in boiling water, where a couple of degrees difference of you thinking bad stuff, you probably are going to be fine. But then suddenly the water's boiling and you didn't realize that you're supposed to hop out and ask for help.
As much as we talked about it before, where I was like, emergency plan in place, if something happens, I need to reach out, like that's it, right? That's the way I've set this up, and there's other things that I've set up too, and if I don't follow that, obviously I'm doing it wrong. And obviously it didn't happen, that the dark weekend here, and I just fell back into myself, and I ended up like just recoiling so far back that I just ended up like, I don't want to ruin anybody else's time, right? Because if I do that, I'm just going to be, it's almost being an inconvenience to someone else. I don't want to inconvenience anybody else. It's the worst feeling I could ever think of, like for me at that moment, where it's like, oh, I'm just going to bring down their time. I mean, they might be having a great time, and all of a sudden they're worried about me, and I don't want to do that, and type of situation. And you can start running through all those thoughts of just like, oh, how, all these negative thoughts about you just being, oh, I'm worthless, and I'm like bringing other people down too, things like that, yada 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 type of situation. And it's a hard thing to really like separate from, like, because I think everybody has like unfiltered thoughts, of like, that's just kind of like how everybody is, like things that are unfiltered stay inside of us, and we don't filter those through us and say those out loud, because if we do, like, if everyone just said whatever they thought ever, obviously there would be some bad stuff, you know. So, sometimes there are things you don't say, but you think them, and that's in your own mind, and like that, those are unfiltered things you don't say, right? And there are normal times for that, right? But people, like for us, like sometimes we can't separate it, and sometimes we overthink it. Of like, is this just something is this just something I'm thinking that shouldn't be said, or is it just something that I'm like overthinking and, you know, really like putting more pressure on myself than I should be, you know? And it's a weird thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this kind of comes to the question that we've never dedicated an episode to this, but like it's a common theme in stuff that we talk about, and I'm sure it's a common theme in stuff that we think about, but like, to what extent are you, like, is the depression or the OCD or the ADHD or the anxiety or whatever it is that you have or you think you have or you feel symptoms of, to what extent is that you, and to what extent is that something you have?
Yeah.
And I feel like lots of people will tell you that, you know, or it's a common thing to say, like, my depression does not define me and stuff. And I think that's good. You know, you shouldn't have to feel defined by something that is like a medical thing that's happening. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I fully understand and sometimes feel like some of these things I've struggled with so long, or, you know, for not so much for depression, but for some of the other things that I've experienced, I treasure the lessons that I've learned from them, and or even some of the thought patterns so much that they are a part of who I am, because I like grew around them, or I grew through them, or I like the way that they affected me. You know, even if it hurt at the time, I like the way that they affected me so much that I do want that to be a part of my personality. Okay. You know, like, because I never want to be a person that, for example, with the eating disorder, like, I probably would have gone my whole life, like, I obviously have like thin person privilege, you know, and like light skin privilege and a bunch of that stuff. So I probably, like, I could have easily gone a bunch of my life not understanding what it was like to hate the way you look or feel like you're the wrong weight or the wrong proportions or the wrong everything about your body, because society wouldn't have told me that I like was the wrong body. Like, society would have been like, great job, keep it up, and I could have been like, okay, great, this is the best, you know. Mm-hmm. Like, so I think with that, for example, it's not like I wish an eating disorder upon myself, but like the lessons that I've learned in both dealing with that and in the ways that it opened my eyes to how people get treated based on size and a bunch of other stuff matter so much to me. I love those so much. I treasure them so much that I don't want to think of the fact that I had an eating disorder as something that's totally outside of me, because I really love that stuff and I want to keep it close to my heart. And the communities that are, you know, that talk about either body positivity or body neutrality or any of that stuff that works for people and makes them feel better and feel loved and feel like their body is either good or okay, whichever one they want. I think that those are so great that that's stuff I want to keep close to me. And so I don't necessarily want to think my blah blah does not define me, because sometimes I do want that stuff to define me. But at the same time, I struggle a lot with how much am I this thing that I've had for so long versus how much is it a thing that's happening to me. And so I think that's part of the question when we're talking about, are we creating these fake personas by hiding this stuff from people? And the answer is not black and white at all, I think. Because to some extent, you know, Jelani is right that everybody has unfiltered thoughts all of the time. Mm-hmm. And for us, probably a greater proportion of those thoughts are like bad, dark thoughts. Yeah. But for other people, they might just be like stupid thoughts or boring thoughts. You know, I don't feel like I don't really know a person just because they don't tell me every time they think, oh, I wish I was eating Chipotle. Oh, that cloud looks like a cricket. oh, that person's sundress looks like a funny triangle. Like I don't need to know all that stuff that they're reflexively thinking in order to know them as a person. And so maybe like other people don't need to know all the stuff that I'm reflexively thinking that happens to be dark in order to know me as a person. There's kind of that argument too. And there's also the argument that it doesn't matter as much what we think by accident as much as what we choose to act on or choose to say out loud or choose to be. For example, if society tells us, I'm going to go back to like body stuff, but society tells us that certain things on bodies are bad or unattractive. And so you might have something that you don't like about your body, like love handles, for example, and that if you see them on somebody else, you might like temporarily be like, ew, those. And then you realize, oh no, I only think that because I feel bad about that part on my body because like the world of the media told me I was supposed to, but that's stupid. I don't really believe that. And I would never say that out loud. And like, I thought the thought for a second, but I don't want to think that anymore. That's not who I am. And so like, to some extent, maybe some of the dark, like me thinking I'm worthless, I would never want to think that about somebody else. I would never want to think that about me. So maybe that's not really who I am. And maybe that doesn't need to be said out loud either until the point where I'm saying, hey, I need your help because I'm thinking I'm worthless too much. Yeah. But there's lots of times that I'll think it by accident and that maybe I should just let it go and be like, this is a thought that, my brain chemicals conditioned me to have, or that society or my trauma or whatever conditioned me to have, and maybe I don't need to hold on to it, and maybe it doesn't need to define me. And maybe in some cases it's the stuff that we choose to talk about and the conversations that we choose to have and that we choose to focus on that make us who we are, instead of all of the noise that's coming through our brains, a lot of which may be unwanted, especially if you're depressed or anxious or anything.
Yeah, I think it's a tough question, and it's a tough thing to try and figure out the answer to. Everyone wants to know who they are, and everyone, especially in our situations where we have this bombardment of like just these negative inner thoughts, the inner voices, as we talked about before, where it's like it constantly comes through, and we're trying to separate what is real and what is us just being overly negative on ourselves, and trying to separate who we are from like the people we present to other people, to people who whether it's a random stranger or if it's someone who's real close to us. The idea of like whether or not we can accept which one is the real us, and accept that maybe there's a little bit of both, and maybe it's okay that there are some things that like not everyone's going to know on the inside, and it's not something that we hate ourselves for, but it's something that like there are things that like not everyone is going to be able to see. Not everyone is going to be able to present the inner scars that we lacerate ourselves with on the inside all the time. And maybe one day you get comfortable with somebody who you really trust, and maybe you can open up. You don't know that at this moment, you haven't, or people at home who haven't opened up and shown like the dark side to other people and really expressed themselves a lot more. But at the same time, just like there are everybody with unfiltered thoughts, sometimes in our states, we have just an over bombardment of like just us self-hate and this kind of disillusions on like ourselves, just like you brought up with the love handle type thing of just like maybe there are certain things that we don't like about ourselves, and that we really hyper focus on, and at the same time maybe it's not something that like needs to be said and all the time, but it's something that like eventually maybe it's something you can open up to someone about and talk about here and there, but at the same time it's not like constantly some bombardment of just like opening up and unfilter yourself completely, because sometimes like the things that we deal with on the inside aren't exactly things that we should be sharing all the time, but at the same time that they're over exertions of ourselves, something that was over negative on ourselves. And I don't think it's necessarily like the reflection of like who we really are sometimes. Sometimes it's just hyper deformed versions of ourselves that we present ourselves with, but there are versions of ourselves that we can present to other people, but it's just trying to find out and accepting who that is, because I think people in our states that in our minds that we have a problem, a very large problem with like actually opening up and actually accepting who we are, because the problem is like we tend to be overly negative on like who we think we are, and it's, I don't know, it's a tough question. It's a tough question to answer. I don't know. What about you?
Well, I think maybe for me there might be a difference between not sharing because you don't want, because I don't really have the problem where I'm not sharing because I don't theoretically trust somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe some of the stuff that would make me feel like I'm not being my real self is not sharing because I don't want to hurt somebody else or make them sad. And it's like you said earlier, if I asked them, hey, should I tell you something about me because I want to say it to you and I want to share it with you, or just tell you something that I was thinking because I want to be real with you, but it might make you sad, they'd probably be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, just tell me. I'm here for you, the happy parts of you and the sad parts of you. Yeah. And like, while it does make me sad when you're sad, like, you can't really treat every day like it's everyone's birthday party,
Yeah.
And like we were talking about earlier too, that kind of creates a thing where you're sometimes dangerously unable to tell the difference between your stubbed toe and your broken toe, and it makes it harder to ask for help, or even just, so a lot of the times, the people that you're telling this stuff to, they're not the people who will like clinically help you in terms of like prescribing medicine or therapy, but telling your friends like, hey, I have this intention to like go back to therapy, or hey, I have this intention to work on my journaling to get rid of negative thoughts and stuff like that. That stuff can really help if you just tell somebody in the real world, because that makes it more real and that makes you feel like you have to do it. And so maybe that might be the heavier or the less productive part of me hiding some of my own thoughts. But I don't know that it's really necessary, or that it should really bother me if I'm not talking about stuff because I don't find it productive for me. If I'm like, I want to just go for a run today, and so yes, I did think negative things about my body, but no, I don't need to talk about them to anybody else or to me. I'm just going to have the thought, going to pass through me, going to go for a run now. Whatever, I don't have time for this. Because I think a lot of the times in my life that I have been the least, like, anxious or intrusive thoughtsy or hating on myself, especially appearance-wise, like very much, especially appearance-wise. Because if I'm just busy and I'm getting stuff done that I care about, then I don't really even have time to be like looking in the mirror really close, looking at my pores, thinking, those aren't the size I wish my pores were, and like, is that a wrinkle? And like, why is the skin that color? Because if you're busy, you don't have time for that stuff. And so that's been some of the time that I've been happiest, like body and face wise, because I'm just like not paying attention to it, because I don't want to be the type of person that's looking at myself in the mirror that closely. That seems like something that I would just end up doing that over and over again until one day I die, And so I think if you're not confronting some of that stuff because you don't think that it's worthwhile, I think that's kind of, if that works for you, then that's kind of okay. And I had I visited one of my best friends when I was at my cousin's wedding a couple of weeks ago, and we had talked about my eating disorder, because I never told her while I was living with her that I had an eating disorder, because I didn't want her to be looking at me while I was eating and like be worrying about whether or not I was overeating, because again, for me, it was really hard to convince people that I had an eating disorder. Like, was really hard to get through to either like doctors or even at a time my parents. But it was really hard to be like, hey, I'm for sure binge eating. I know this because I eat until I'm full and then I keep eating even though I don't want to, but I can't stop myself and it hurts. And then I feel like throwing up, but I don't, because the quantity of food that I was eating looked like kind of like a normal American portion. And so I didn't want it to be this thing where, since it was not about to be obvious to anyone from the outside whether or not I was binge eating or just eating some fun treats because we're watching the Super Bowl, that I didn't want, you know, and there's a lot of that stuff in college where you're like eating junk food and eating treats and you want to be allowed to enjoy that stuff because sometimes you're not binge eating it. Sometimes you're just eating and you're okay. And I didn't want all of that stuff. I didn't want her to feel like she had to, like, not police, but just notice all of that stuff all the time on my behalf to make sure I was okay, because I didn't want to bother her. And I think that was like a bad thing where like I wasn't, and I explained this to her and I apologized for not telling her, because I was like, it's not that I didn't trust you. I obviously trusted you with all my other secrets, and it's not that I thought that you would think poorly of me or you know, be like repulsed by me or ashamed of me or whatever. I just didn't want to bother you with it, and I didn't want to burden you with it, and I didn't want that feeling of being watched because you cared so much about me. And so I felt bad for not telling her, but also I think that was an example of me hiding something in a really bad and not productive way, because I just didn't want somebody to have to worry about me or feel sad for me or whatever. You know, whereas I think if I am nowadays, if I'm like thinking oh, I'm too fat or whatever, like now that I am further into recovery, I can more easily be like, okay, that's stupid. Like, you don't need to think those thoughts right now. Let's do something else that's fun with our bodies, like go work out or like go eat a popsicle or whatever. Like, and now that I'm further away from it, now that it is just a stubbed toe, it's like, it's fine. But before, I for sure had a broken whole foot and was like, no, everyone at the party, I'm fine. This is great. So yeah, I think that there's a difference there, and that you have to kind of, that it helps to try and recognize it, because some of those hides are for sure, like, I don't want to say bad, like it's your fault, but just unproductive, and like they're not what's going to help you.
Yeah, it's sometimes we hide stuff and it can be very unproductive, and yeah, like the example you gave there about, like, you know, you isolated that yourself from that, and you didn't want to burden everyone else with, you know, the fact that you're going through this. And like for people in our state, I think that's something that's most common for everybody, that like we always kind of like, I don't want to burden everybody else, I'm just going to isolate myself off, or I'm just going to keep it to myself. And that's probably the most common thing that like really ends up like coming back around to like being the most unproductive thing we did, you know, where it's not reaching out and not talking to other people. And it's, you know, it's the hardest thing to do, you know, to reach out and talk to other people and understand that sometimes it's okay to, you know, that you can talk to people, and that, you know, it's, while it can be unproductive and it can feel like, you know, I mean, me recently, I just did it too, where it was like, I'm going to be burdening everybody. I don't want to like make anybody else, you know, depressed or sad about like everything. And, you know, because they care about me, I don't want them to, you know, be overburdened by this, you know, by me going down some sort of spiral. But, you know, that could have been like the most unproductive thing I did that weekend. You know, it could have been like the most harmful thing I did, you know, to myself by not doing that. And, you know, it's sometimes it's really hard. I think we push that on this podcast a lot, where it's like, you know, hey, even if you can't seek help with, you know, medically or anything like that, at least try to talk with somebody, you know, because like that's probably one of the biggest things you can do, you know, like find, again, we talk about like Yikesland here is like a community of people who just like live in this land of yikes, and we can relate to each other, and that we're not alone. We're making everybody realize we're not alone. Chris, you're not alone here. I'm here too, and everyone out there who we know have commented on this have just said, we're not alone in this situation. We should be realizing that more, but every now and then we get lost in our own thoughts and our own minds, where we just end up thinking that like, hey, I'm not going to burden anybody with this, and then 9 times out of 10 that's where it ends up biting us, coming back to taunt us by becoming more productive.
I don't want you to feel like blame for yourself for not reaching out to anybody, or for not realizing sooner that you kind of were in a worse place than just a manageable, I'm having some bad thoughts, I don't need to tell anybody, whatever. Because I think, it's also, that's just going to create a double hurt situation where you both experience the pain, and now you feel like it's your fault for experiencing the pain. And I don't want you to feel that way, where, I think there has to be some sort of way to feel like, next time I'm going to try to get this sooner, next time I'm going to act differently because I think it might work better for me, but without also thinking the reason I'm going to do that next time is because last time I did bad and I was bad, know? And there's got to be a way to think the hopeful, good, hope that your next reaction is, more productive or more useful for you, without thinking that it means you like did badly before. There's got to be something, there's got to be a way to just think the good half of that and not feel the blame half of that, because I don't want you to feel like, oh, I came up with this plan and I didn't use it, so like I'm a failure at this plan, or at least it's a huge setback in the plan. Because like, again, like recovery or handling, or however you want to phrase it, dealing with these things is not going to be linear, where it's not like just because you take a step every day doesn't mean sometimes there aren't going to be steps that are quote unquote back. But I think maybe thinking about it that way, thinking about it as like, oh no, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, can sometimes be kind of hurtful to yourself, to feel like, oh, I'm never going to get anywhere because look how slow I'm moving. And maybe it's not about getting somewhere so much as it is just building up like mental reserves and resources and skills, so that you have all of this sort of strength and vulnerability that you can use, but then not blaming yourself, because we're all human, and sometimes we're not going to realize things, or sometimes we're going to make, I don't even want to call them mistakes, but make miscalculations about what a situation looks like. And like, that's okay. That's all part of being human, and that's all part of being a human who lives in Yikesland. And so, I hope that you don't blame yourself for that. And, I hope that in the future you do break glass in case of sadness, but at the same time, I don't blame you, and I don't think you should blame yourself for not doing that right away,
Yeah. I mean, pep talk.
But I really believe it, so it's not like a false pep talk.
Yeah. And I hope that I hope that everyone else out there can realize too that, that we're all going to falter sometimes. We're all going to make these decisions that like have ourselves questioning on like, are we going to, oh no, am I going to be able to open up to someone one day? Am I going to be able to, am I showing someone who I really am, or am I just always presenting these false identities, or am I just going to keep, concealing and isolating myself off from everybody? We're going to falter. We're going to, there are things that like, it's not an easy trip that we're taking here. It's sometimes in Yikesland, it's hard. But I think that like, as long as everyone out there and everyone, here too as well, realize that like, we're not alone. We can reach out to each other, and we can, even though we feel like we may be a burden sometimes, understanding that like, it's not, and you may think that, and sometimes like realizing that it's not always going to be that way. We're not always going to just be a burden. Sometimes people just care and can empathize, and you may think that they're feeling sad about it, but really they're happy that you came to them for and to talk to them about it. There's other ways of looking at it, and I think there's ways we can get there as well. So yeah. Anything else? Any other final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I hope that I think it's pretty clear that obviously the things that I hide about myself are not they're not the big things. Like the fact that I have depression is not hidden, and now it never can be because it's on the internet forever. It's here now. But in general, in my personal life, I'm very open about that stuff. I'm very open about my history with my eating disorder and anxiety, and I try to intentionally be open and vulnerable about it, even when it's hard, or even when I'm worried that it will either set me back or make people not believe in me or think that I'm not capable or question my decisions, because I think it's super important to show that these things are more common than people think or than the media portrays, and that they're okay, and that you can still do stuff and live in the world, and that Yikesland is all around us, but that we can still move about the world, even if sometimes in the morning I'm gonna have so much trouble getting out of bed, but then sometimes I'm still gonna go to work and do a bunch of stuff, and that it doesn't mean that you're this weird sad alien that can't touch anything or interact with the world. It's you're a real person that has real struggles, but can still kind of be here and matter and impact things and impact people. And so when I say that I worry about not sharing my real self with people, it seems kind of stupid because I'm obviously sharing my real self with so many people and all of you guys, and I love it's hard, but I love that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that maybe what this has brought to light is that there are times when it's not helping you to hide stuff if you're worried about hurting people or you're worried about being a burden, but that other times maybe it's okay, and maybe the way you define yourself can be as little or as much of as you want of whatever thing it is that you're struggling with, because maybe those are thoughts that you're really proud of what they've taught you, or maybe those are thoughts that you think, hey, this is mostly a thing I've overcome or that I can deal with, so I don't want to listen to these thoughts right now, and I don't have to give them space either. And I think that there's, none of that is black and white, but that being able to sort out when this stuff works for you and when it doesn't work for you might be some of what the important part is. And I appreciate you guys, listening to my internal crisis about this. But I think worrying that you're not being your real self is a very common thing for even people who are not depressed or anxious. Everybody's trying to be authentic, and lots of people are trying to present themselves authentically, and they're worried that however that filters through, especially with your social media presence, they're worried that that's not real, and maybe worrying too much about whether or not you're being real is also inhibiting your ability to be real.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys being here with us and listening to us. If you have any thoughts on this or any thoughts for future podcasts, we would absolutely love to hear from you.
Yeah, we would.
We can be found on Twitter and Facebook. You can hit up our Instagram at Yikesland_podcast, or you can email us at yikesland@gmail.com if you want to go long form. Please remember, you guys are not alone, and if you need a resource to reach out to, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 24/7, and it's completely free and confidential. That number is 1-800-273-8255.
Yes. We want to make sure you guys are here with us every week. Once again, not just, listen to the podcast and be with us. We want to make sure that you guys are making it to every Tuesday because, again, being here in the Yikesland with us, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that, everyone has these crises of self-doubt and self-identity as well, and knowing that, we're all in this together and we're all just trying to find our way through this world we call Yikesland, and just know that we're here and we care about you guys a lot. So reach out, let us know, and keep getting to the next day, guys. That's what we want to make sure. So this has been your host, Johnny Who.
Along with host Chris Fung. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you so much.